It's a Friday evening in late October, and I'm driving 40 minutes out of my way through rural Kentucky to pick up a man who has never once offered to put gas in my tank. His name is Brandon. He's been my closest friend for going on 6 years. We grew up on the same road outside of Harlan, played ball at the same high school, got our first jobs at the same lumberyard on Route 7. The kind of history that makes you feel like friendship is permanent. Like it doesn't need tending, because it's been there so long it grew roots. I'm driving out to get him because his car is in the shop. Again. Third time this year. And I'm telling myself the whole way out that this is just what you do for people you care about. I believed that the way some people believe in the weather forecast. Completely, right up until it's wrong. That's where this story begins. Not at some rock-bottom moment, but in a pickup truck on a 2-lane Kentucky road, doing something kind for someone who wouldn't notice. Brandon was the type of guy who filled a room. Loud laugh, big personality, always had a story that ended with everyone leaning in. People were drawn to him, and I think somewhere along the way, I started measuring my own worth by proximity to that. Like being his closest friend meant something about me was worth showing up for, too. So I kept showing up. Moved furniture when he switched apartments. Lent money when things got thin. Twice, if I'm being honest. Covered shifts at the yard when his schedule got complicated. Every time something came up, I was the first call and the last person to leave. That was the deal. Or at least, that's how I understood it. My plan was simple. Good friends are consistent. You don't disappear when things get inconvenient. You stay, you show up, and eventually that means something to people. I was certain of it. There was a man at the yard named Clyde. Clyde was 60-something, worked the receiving dock, spoke maybe 200 words a day, and somehow made all of them count. He'd watched me cover for Brandon a handful of times without ever saying a word about it. Just watched. The way older men do when they're waiting for you to figure something out on your own. One afternoon, he handed me a bottle of water without me asking and said, "You know what a mule's worth?" I told him I didn't. He said, "Exactly as much as whoever's riding it decides." Then he went back to the dock. I laughed it off. Odd thing to say on a Wednesday. I didn't think about it again for 2 months. By November, I started noticing patterns I'd been too generous to name before. Brandon would go quiet for weeks, then reappear right when he needed something. A ride, a favor, an ear for a problem that always seemed to trace back to money or someone he'd burned. The conversations ran one direction. I listened, I helped, I drove, he moved on. Still, I held to my plan. Stay consistent. Good friends don't cut and run. Then came the company Christmas party at the yard. Rented hall on the edge of town, cash bar, half the county crammed into one room. Brandon showed up with a whole group I didn't recognize, barely acknowledged me, spent the night on the other side of the room laughing at stories I wasn't part of. I told myself he was just working the crowd. That's Brandon. That's who he is. Then someone from accounting, a woman named Patrice who had no reason to lie to me, leaned over and said something I wasn't ready for. "Your buddy Brandon told Phil you've been dragging your feet on the Dawson account." Said it in front of 3 people. Phil was our floor supervisor. The Dawson account was mine. I'd stayed late 4 nights straight getting it straight. I set my drink down on a table and walked outside. It was cold. Parking lot gravel, single lamppost, the sound of the party muffled through the walls. I stood out there in my good flannel shirt and tried to arrange what she'd just told me into some shape that made sense. I turned it over 6 or 7 ways. Tried to find the version where Brandon had a reason, a misunderstanding, a bad day, a miscommunication. I couldn't find it. What I found instead was Clyde's question. "You know what a mule's worth?" I'd been a mule. Useful, dependable, always available, and worth exactly as much as the person driving me decided. Not a dollar more. I stood in that parking lot and let that settle into me slow and cold, the way truth usually does when you've been keeping it at arm's length. Every favor, every covered shift, every 40-minute drive, every dollar let. I hadn't been being a good friend. I'd been auditioning, performing loyalty, hoping someone would finally look over and say, "Yeah, this one's worth keeping around." And that man had looked right past me and used my name to make himself look better in front of our boss. I drove home alone that night, left without saying goodbye to anyone. The next morning, I didn't text Brandon. Not to confront him, not to explain. I just didn't reach out. Stopped covering for him at the yard. Stopped being the first number he could dial when the math didn't work out for him. I didn't make it a scene. I just quietly closed the door. The silence on his end told me everything I needed to know about what had been holding that friendship together. A few weeks later, I ran into Clyde on the dock. Told him I'd finally figured out what a mule was worth. He nodded, slow, like I'd caught up to something he'd known for years. "Good," he said. "Now figure out what you're worth." Then he picked up his clipboard and walked away. I've thought about that sentence more than almost anything else anyone said to me. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know in October. Chasing someone's approval isn't loyalty. It looks like loyalty, it feels like loyalty, but underneath, it's something else entirely. It's a quiet belief that your value needs to be proven. That if you work hard enough, stay long enough, give enough, someone will finally confirm what you should have already known about yourself. They won't. That's not how it works. The people who have to be convinced you're worth keeping around were never going to be convinced. You were just making it easier for them to keep taking. The people who belong in your life don't need a performance. They just need you to show up, and they'll do the same. Stop auditioning for people who already know they're not going to cast you. You were never supposed to earn your place. You were supposed to recognize it. If this story lit something up in you, even just a quiet flicker, share it with someone whose light has gone a little dim. Subscribe to this channel and come back in a couple of days. There are more stories where this one came from.